What if the reason you feel so uncomfortable in places you used to enjoy is because you're no longer the same person? What if the silence you've been hearing from heaven isn't absence, it's alignment? Have you ever wondered why certain people suddenly drifted away? Why open doors started closing without warning? Why your spirit feels restless, even though your life looks fine on the outside? You're not going crazy. You're not too sensitive. Something deep is happening beneath the surface, something spiritual. And you can feel it, but you can't explain it. You don't laugh the same. You don't crave the same things. You're starting to notice the cost of your peace. You pray but not out of routine, out of desperation. So here's the question that's been haunting your quiet moments. What if you've been marked by something you didn't choose, but can't walk away from either? What if this inner tension isn't resistance, but proof that you're being reshaped for something greater? This isn't about confusion. This is about calling. And once you've been called, going back won't make sense anymore. Number 1, you remain faithful, even when obedience costs you comfort. Faithfulness reveals its true weight not when life is easy, but when obedience begins to demand things you never planned to surrender. There comes a moment in the journey with God where following Him no longer fits neatly into your comfort zone. The prayers are no longer answered quickly, the direction feels unclear, and the cost of obedience starts to press against your emotions, your routines, and sometimes even your relationships. This is where many people quietly turn back, not because they stop believing in God, but because believing becomes uncomfortable. Yet there are those who choose to remain faithful anyway. They stay when leaving would feel easier. They obey when disobedience would bring immediate relief. And that choice, though invisible to most, carries tremendous spiritual weight. Because obedience that costs nothing produces little, but obedience that costs comfort reshapes the soul. Remaining faithful in these moments often feels misunderstood. You may look around and see others choosing convenience, chasing ease, adjusting their convictions to fit their circumstances. Meanwhile, you feel pulled in a different direction, one that requires patience, restraint, and trust without guarantees. Obedience in this season doesn't feel heroic, it feels lonely. It asks you to release control, to accept uncertainty, and to walk forward without the reassurance of visible outcomes. Yet this is precisely how faith matures. Comfort keeps faith shallow, but discomfort forces it to grow roots. When God allows obedience to cost you something, it is not to punish you, but to detach you from dependencies that would limit where He is taking you. He is teaching you to rely not on clarity but on alignment, not on feelings but on conviction. And while your flesh may resist this process, your spirit recognizes it as necessary. What many don't realize is that faithfulness in discomfort is not passive endurance. It is active agreement with God's purpose. Every time you choose obedience over relief, you are making a declaration in the unseen realm that God's will matters more than your temporary comfort. This is not weakness, it is strength under discipline. It is the kind of faith that doesn't need applause to survive. It continues quietly, steadily, anchored in the belief that what God is building inside you is more important than what you are losing around you. And though this stage may feel heavy, it is laying the foundation for something far greater. Because before God entrusts you with more influence, more clarity, or more responsibility, He first establishes your loyalty when the cost is real. And that loyalty, once formed, cannot be shaken. Faithfulness in discomfort has a strange way of revealing what you truly believe about God. When the doors remain shut, when the answers don't come, when your acts of obedience seem to echo into silence, that's when your theology gets tested. Not the one you preach, but the one you live. Do you believe God is still with you when nothing changes? Do you still believe His promises when the opposite is happening? The people who remain faithful in the shadows are often the ones God uses most powerfully in the light. Because they didn't stay obedient for attention or reward, they stayed because their hearts were rooted in trust. They chose to believe that obedience isn't transactional, it's transformational. That even if they don't get what they asked for, they're becoming who God called them to be. And that shift, from expecting outcomes to embracing obedience as a lifestyle, is where spiritual maturity is born. This kind of obedience changes how you see everything. You stop viewing discomfort as a punishment and begin seeing it as preparation. The closed doors don't offend you, they refine you. The silence doesn't scare you, it trains your hearing. You begin to understand that faithfulness isn't about performing perfectly, it's about staying aligned when nothing makes sense. And in that space, something deep happens in the soul. Your prayers become more honest. Your worship becomes more raw. Your motives are purified. The applause of others stops mattering because your heart is chasing something higher. That's what God is after, not just your compliance but your trust. And trust built in the fire cannot be faked. It shows up in your posture, in your tone, in your decisions. People may not understand why you keep showing up, why you haven't quit, why you still believe, but they don't need to. Because this isn't about them. This is between you and God. And maybe that's why you felt so isolated lately. Because when obedience becomes personal, the journey becomes narrower. You stop being able to explain it all. God told me becomes your only answer, and that's enough. Because the more you walk this path, the less you care about explaining your process to those who aren't walking it with you. You start realizing that what feels like loss is actually protection. That what seems like delay is actually development. And little by little, you stop needing everything to make sense in order to stay faithful. You're no longer moved by timelines or likes or outcomes. You're moved by obedience. You're moved by the whisper of the Spirit saying stay, even when your feelings scream leave. And it's in that quiet, painful, sacred place that you're being formed into someone unshakable. There's something sacred about the faithfulness no one sees. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't make headlines or go viral. But in heaven, it echoes like thunder. Because every time you choose to stay the course without applause, you declare that God is worth it, even when comfort isn't guaranteed. This is the type of obedience that builds legacies. The kind that outlasts emotions. The kind that looks like Noah building an ark with no rain in sight. Like Abraham walking up a mountain with a knife in faith. Like Ruth clinging to Naomi with nothing left to gain. These weren't comfortable decisions. They were covenant decisions. And they changed history. What? Because they were built on trust, not results. They were the product of hearts convinced that God doesn't owe explanations, just our yes. And maybe, just maybe, that's what God is developing in you. Not quick victories but deep roots. Not flashy miracles but quiet endurance. He's teaching you to hold on when there's nothing to hold on to but His Word. He's training your eyes to see what isn't visible yet. He's showing you that real obedience doesn't always come with instant breakthrough. Sometimes it comes with greater resistance. And that's where most people give up. But you've kept showing up. You've kept praying even when the answers didn't come. You've worshipped with tears in your eyes. You've forgiven when you had every right to stay bitter. That kind of obedience? That's kingdom gold. It's the kind of posture that moves the heart of God. Because it tells Him, you're enough for me even if nothing changes. So if it feels like your faithfulness has gone unnoticed, it hasn't. Heaven has been watching. And there are doors being prepared with your name on them. Not because you forced them open, but because you stayed faithful when everything said to quit. And when those doors open, it won't be by your striving. It will be by God's timing. Because that's the reward of faithfulness. Not always comfort, but always purpose. And that purpose is unfolding right now, even in the discomfort, even in the silence, even in the not yet. So don't stop. Don't shrink. Don't let the absence of applause make you question your assignment. You're walking in divine rhythm, and the breakthrough you've been preparing for is already being written into your story. Now breathe and get ready, we're just getting started. Number 2, you carry inner peace, even when answers haven't arrived. There's a rare kind of peace that doesn't come from clarity, it comes from closeness. It's the peace you feel when nothing is fixed but somehow you know you're held. It doesn't erase the storm but it changes how you stand in it. It's the peace that whispers, God is still with me, when the prayer hasn't been answered and the door hasn't opened. This isn't the peace the world gives. It's not based on explanation, validation, or visible change. It's spiritual. And if you've ever carried that peace in the middle of a storm, you know how supernatural it is. It's the quiet confidence that says, even if I don't understand this season, I trust the one who leads me through it. Because real peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's the presence of Christ in the middle of it. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. Peace is a weapon. When life tries to shake you, when confusion knocks at your door, when anxiety wants to take over, peace stands its ground. That kind of inner peace doesn't mean you're not hurting. It means you've decided not to let your heart be ruled by what your eyes see. You might not have all the answers, but you've learned to anchor yourself in the promises. Promises like, He will never leave you, and He keeps in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on Him. You've stopped measuring God's love by how quickly He moves and started measuring it by how deeply He stays. And that shift has changed you. You've become someone who breathes deeply when others panic, who worships while waiting, who walks slowly through seasons most people rush to escape. That's not weakness. That's spiritual maturity. There are people watching your life right now who don't understand how you're still smiling. They don't know the battles you've faced, the questions you've cried into your pillow, the nights you laid awake wondering if God even heard you. And yet they see you showing up. still kind, still steady, still full of grace. Why? Because you're not depending on answers to find rest. You've found rest in the presence. You've discovered that some of the greatest moves of God happen in silence. Some of the deepest healings happen without an audience. And some of the strongest believers are the ones who've stopped begging for a sign and started walking by faith. That's the kind of peace you carry now. The kind that says, God hasn't answered me yet, but I'm still at peace. And that peace, it's preparing you for something greater than answers. It's preparing you for alignment. Peace in the waiting room is one of the clearest signs that the Holy Spirit is working deeply in someone's life. Because let's be honest, waiting without answers is hard. It presses on every part of you that craves control, that wants to predict outcomes, that needs closure. But when you carry inner peace despite that pressure, it means something in your spirit has matured. It means you've stopped demanding timelines and started trusting divine timing. And this kind of peace is not passive. It's not doing nothing, it's doing the deep, unseen work of surrender. You keep showing up in prayer even when it feels like heaven is silent. You keep reading the Word not just for answers but for presence. You stop trying to decode every delay and start asking, God, what are you forming in me here? That's spiritual authority. That's the kind of peace the enemy can't mess with. Because here's what most people miss. Sometimes the absence of an answer is actually an invitation. God's silence is not always denial. Sometimes it's a sacred pause. A pause meant to deepen your roots so when the wind does blow you won't be moved. A pause that protects you from rushing into what you're not yet ready for. And while the world tells you to hustle for clarity, the Spirit teaches you to rest in mystery. This is where your intimacy with God grows, not in the answers but in the seeking. In the quiet spaces where your flesh wants noise, but your soul learns to listen. And slowly that peace becomes your home. Not because everything makes sense but because His presence is enough. You don't need to feel peace to carry it. Sometimes you just know, God is here, and that's all the reassurance your soul needs. Not explanations, just Emmanuel. And if you're honest, there's a strange kind of freedom in no longer needing all the answers. You begin to let go of the pressure to prove, to perform, to control the outcome. You stop comparing your journey to others, because you realize peace isn't found in reaching a destination, but in walking daily with God. Some of the most powerful testimonies are not the ones where the miracle came quickly, but the ones where the believer waited, wept, and still worshipped. That's your story. You've learned to live with unspoken prayers and unresolved pain, and yet you carry a glow, a gentleness, a wisdom that can't be faked. It's the kind of peace people can feel when they're near you. They may not know what to call it, but it's the fragrance of someone who's walked through fire and found God in the middle of it. And what's forming in you now? It's only the beginning. This kind of inner peace doesn't come from personality, it comes from process. It's forged in the long, slow fire of unanswered prayers, unseen battles, and quiet obedience. It's not the product of perfect circumstances, but of deep conviction. You didn't get here because everything went your way, you got here because you stopped needing everything to go your way. That shift is spiritual. It's what happens when your foundation is no longer built on circumstances but on truth. The truth that God is good even when life doesn't feel good. The truth that you are loved even when you feel forgotten. The truth that you are held even when nothing around you is holding together. And while others may look at you and assume you're just strong, what they're actually witnessing is peace. A peace that's been fought for in prayer, carved out in worship, and anchored in promises you haven't even seen fulfilled yet. You've learned to stop chasing quick fixes and start cultivating quiet strength. That's rare. Most people run from silence. You've learned to live in it. You don't fill every space with noise because you've discovered the sacred in stillness. When others rush to solve, you sit to listen. When fear rises, you don't immediately panic. You pause. You breathe. You remember. That kind of peace isn't accidental, it's trained. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes your posture. Not a moment you experience now and then, but a mindset you carry daily. It shows up in the way you speak, slower, more thoughtful, less reactive. It shows up in how you deal with delay, not with despair but with discernment. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? But, what is God doing in me through this? That shift alone can change the way you experience every season of life. So here you are, still waiting on some answers, still walking through unknowns. But something in you has changed. You're not anxious like before. You're not pushing doors open or forcing clarity. You've learned that peace isn't the reward at the end of the struggle. It's the oil that carries you through it. And the more you rest in that truth, the more God trusts you with it. Because peace is a responsibility, not just a gift. It makes you a safe place for others. It turns you into a carrier of calm in a world of chaos. And as strange as it sounds, sometimes the people with the least visible breakthroughs are the ones carrying the deepest spiritual breakthroughs inside them. Maybe that's you. Maybe this season of waiting hasn't been a delay. Maybe it's been the place where God taught you how to walk on water, not with answers, but with peace. Number 3. Opportunities align without you forcing a single door. There comes a moment in your spiritual journey when you realize that not every open door is one you had to knock on. In fact, the most divine doors don't respond to pressure. They respond to positioning. And this is where God begins to reveal a higher strategy. That alignment is more powerful than effort. You spent years trying to prove yourself, pushing into rooms, sending messages, networking, striving, only to end up burned out and disappointed. Then, somewhere along the way, you stopped chasing. Not out of laziness, but out of spiritual awakening. You stopped begging for access and started becoming. You started focusing on who you are when no one is watching. You started praying not just for doors to open, but for the character to carry what's behind them. And that's when things began to shift. Quietly, subtly, miraculously. Invitations came from unexpected places. Provision found you without you marketing yourself. Divine appointments started replacing desperate attempts. It's not that you don't take initiative, you've simply learned that not all motion is progress. Some of the busiest people are also the most misaligned. They have calendars full of meetings but hearts full of emptiness. They force their way into opportunities that their soul isn't ready to carry. But you've been learning to trust God's rhythm. You've stopped forcing what's not flowing. You've stopped manipulating timelines just to make something happen. And it's not because you don't care. It's because you've seen what happens when you wait for God's yes instead of rushing into your own. You've seen how a single conversation can shift your destiny when it's God ordained. How one random meeting at a coffee shop or one late-night message can be the very thing that unlocks a purpose you were never expecting. That's not coincidence. That's orchestration. That's alignment. And it's wild because people around you don't understand how you're walking into places they've been trying to break into for years. They look at you and wonder, how did you get that opportunity? But what they don't see is what happened in the hidden places. The nights of prayer. The silent obedience. The 1,000 quiet decisions to do the right thing when no one was watching. That's where alignment was birthed. And now your life is proof that favor doesn't chase force. It follows surrender. Doors are opening not because you fought harder but because you trusted deeper. And even now, there are alignments forming in the spirit that your mind hasn't caught up with yet. That's the power of walking in your assignment. Things begin to align before you even arrive. And maybe the next thing isn't something you'll chase. Maybe it's something that's already looking for you. One of the greatest signs that you're walking in divine purpose is that things begin to unfold without striving. Not because life becomes easy, but because your spirit becomes aligned. You're no longer desperate for visibility or approval, and that shift alone changes everything. The moment you start believing that God already wrote your story, you stop performing for a position in someone else's. That's when divine magnetism kicks in. It's not arrogance, it's assurance. Assurance that what's for you isn't just waiting for you at the finish line, but is being drawn to your obedience every step of the way. And you start to see the difference between what's available and what's anointed. Not every offer is a divine opportunity. Not every job, partnership, or next step is connected to your destiny. When you were younger in faith, you said yes to anything that glittered. But now, you've got discernment. You've got peace as your confirmation. And peace is never frantic. Peace is steady. Peace doesn't knock doors down, it walks through the ones God opens. There's a strange paradox that happens here. The more you stop chasing the world's version of success, the more the right opportunities begin to chase you. You get calls you didn't expect. Someone brings your name up in a room you didn't even know existed. A message shows up at the exact moment you were about to give up. That's not strategy, that's spiritual favor. Because while others are busy branding themselves, you've been being built in private. And God always rewards the construction done in secret. He opens doors in public to honor what happened when no one clapped for you. The truth is, divine alignment isn't always about timing. It's about timing and transformation. God won't just place you where you want to be. He'll wait until you become who you need to be to handle where you're going. That's why some doors didn't open before. Not because he was withholding, but because he was protecting. And now that you've stopped trying to open every door, you've created room for the right ones to open themselves. And maybe the reason you're reading this right now is because you're in the middle of this exact shift. You feel it, that divine tension between what you could force and what you're choosing to trust for. You're learning to live with less noise, more depth. Less rush, more reverence. You're resisting the pressure to prove and instead resting in the posture of peace. And while it might not always feel productive, it is powerful. You're no longer begging to be included, you're being positioned to be impactful. And there's a huge difference. Because when God positions you, no one can unposition you. No algorithm, no gatekeeper, no closed door can cancel what God has already aligned. And even when it feels quiet, something holy is moving. You're not stagnant, you're being set apart. Because the kind of destiny you're walking into doesn't require a spotlight to grow. It just needs obedience in the dark. The moment you start recognizing that your role is obedience, not outcome, you begin to move differently. You stop networking from desperation and start building from discernment. You no longer chase platforms, you steward your preparation. Because now you've learned a sacred truth: God doesn't reward hustle. He rewards humility. And divine opportunities are rarely flashy, they're often quiet, and they usually show up dressed as inconvenience. Think about it. Joseph didn't walk into Pharaoh's palace with a resume. He walked in with a reputation built in a prison. David didn't force his way into kingship. He served in silence, playing music for a king that would eventually try to kill him. Even Jesus spent 30 years in obscurity before 3 years of visible ministry. What does that tell you? That open doors in the kingdom are not about connections. They're about becoming someone who can carry what God's about to give. And if it's from God, you won't have to manipulate your way in. You'll walk into it by mercy, not by marketing. There's something profoundly peaceful about realizing you don't have to knock on every door to find your purpose. In fact, it's in the stillness, when you stop striving and start surrendering, that you hear the whisper, "This is the way, walk in it." And it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes the door God opens isn't the one with the spotlight, it's the one with the staircase. You expected a stage, but He handed you a shovel. What? Because your next level requires you to dig deeper, not climb higher. And in that process, the right people, resources, and opportunities begin to flow into your life. Not because you chased them, but because you aligned with the frequency of your calling. You see, when your soul is tuned to God's voice, everything else becomes background noise. The fear of missing out fades. The pressure to compete dissolves. You no longer operate from panic, you move from peace. So if you're in a season where nothing seems to be moving but you're doing everything right, don't panic. You might be in divine holding. The kind of season where God doesn't want your effort, He wants your ear. Because the next opportunity isn't something you'll chase, it's something that will chase you. And your only job right now is to stay aligned. Stay faithful. Stay available. Because the right door will never require you to become someone else to walk through it. And when it opens, you won't have to guess. It will confirm everything God has been developing in you during the silence. So hold tight. You're not stuck. You're being stationed. Number 4. Your inner character is being reshaped and refined. There's a version of you that you've never met, one that only emerges through refinement. And here's the truth most people avoid: growth is not glamorous. It's gritty. It's not about becoming who you want to be, it's about becoming who God knows you're capable of being. That process? It's uncomfortable. Because refinement doesn't take place on a stage, it happens in the shadows. It's when you're alone, misunderstood, overlooked. It's when the applause stops and the internal wrestling begins. And it's in that place that God starts reshaping your inner character, not for popularity but for purpose. You start noticing how He allows pressure not to break you, but to reveal what still needs to be burned away. Pride, people-pleasing, insecurity, control. He peels those layers not to punish you but to prepare you. Because where He's taking you, your current version can't survive. It's not about behavior modification, it's about heart transformation. You see, most people pray for elevation but resist refinement. They want the crown but not the crushing. But God doesn't rush this process because He's not just trying to use you, He's trying to mature you. And maturity isn't measured by how much scripture you quote or how long you pray. It's measured by how you respond when God says no. It's revealed in the moments when you're right but you choose to stay silent. When you're tired but you still serve. When you're hurt but you still forgive. That's the kind of refinement that builds legacy, not just image. Because God is not building performers, He's raising carriers. People who don't fold under pressure. People who aren't led by emotions but by discernment. People who know how to handle power with purity. And that kind of character doesn't come from comfort. It comes from fire. Real fire. The kind that burns away your need to be validated. The kind that detoxes your soul of ego, bitterness, and the need to be seen. So if you feel like you're being stretched in every direction right now, maybe it's not an attack. Maybe it's divine refinement. Maybe God is cutting away the extra because He's carving out the essential. And if he's allowing certain things to shake, it's not because you're failing, it's because he's faithful. Faithful to finish what he started. Faithful to correct what could corrupt your future. And here's the secret. The moments you want to quit are usually the moments he's closest. Not fixing the situation but fixing you in it. Because when you're truly refined, storms won't sink you. Rejection won't define you. And titles won't tempt you. You'll start walking with quiet confidence, rooted identity, and a resilience that hell can't duplicate. And just when you think he's done working on you, he'll start showing you how your transformation isn't just personal, it's contagious. One of the most overlooked signs that your inner character is being refined is how God starts to confront your hidden patterns. Not the public ones, but the silent, deeply rooted responses you've normalized. It's the pride that dresses up as confidence. The jealousy you call discernment. The unforgiveness you've rebranded as boundaries. You see, God isn't fooled by surface behavior, he's after the heart posture. And refinement means letting him dig into those places that even you avoid. He'll bring up old wounds not to shame you but to heal them at the root. He'll allow situations that expose how you still react when things don't go your way, not to embarrass you but to invite you into transformation. Because spiritual maturity is rarely proven in victory. It's proven in how you bleed and still believe. How you bend and don't break. How you cry but still choose to obey. It's in those moments when you choose healing over hiding, surrender over control, obedience over comfort. That's where real character is forged. And let's be honest, that kind of refining isn't always visible to others. In fact, it's mostly invisible. While everyone else is celebrating surface success, you're in the secret place learning to die to self. And that's the paradox of the kingdom. While the world applauds speed, God honors depth. While others chase platforms, he builds patience. And while they chase performance, he cultivates presence. That's why some of the most spiritually dangerous people don't have a stage. They have a history with God. A history of choosing what's right when no one is watching. A history of breaking generational cycles not with noise, but with silent, persistent faithfulness. And that's what refinement produces, not a louder voice but a cleaner vessel. One that can carry the weight of divine purpose without cracking under the pressure of man's praise. That doesn't come through achievement, it comes through alignment. And alignment isn't found on the mountaintop, it's discovered in the cave, where you wrestle with God and come out walking different. So if you felt like your life has been stripped lately, stripped of certainty, of people, of status, of distractions, it could be a sign that God is not punishing you but purifying you. Because there are some heights you cannot reach with unhealed wounds. Some doors that won't open until your integrity can sustain them. And some blessings that are delayed, not because they aren't ready but because you aren't yet. And this isn't to shame you, it's to call you higher. Because he loves you too much to bless a version of you that would be destroyed by the very thing you prayed for. So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Maybe ask, what is God building in me? That shift in question changes everything. Because once you see refinement not as rejection, but as recalibration, you'll stop running from the fire and start walking through it with expectation. Expectation that what he's doing in you now is preparation for what he's about to do through you next. There's something sacred about the seasons when God silences the applause, when the affirmations stop, when the results don't match your efforts, when no one notices how much you've changed, except heaven. These are the holy moments of internal renovation, where your identity is no longer built on reactions, but on revelation. And it's in this place, this quiet, uncomfortable space, where God often rewrites your definition of strength. Because true strength isn't found in always being right, but in being righteous. It's not about controlling the outcome but surrendering to the process. Refinement teaches you to choose silence over proving your point, stillness over striving, and patience over panic. It's the school of the Spirit where God doesn't just use your gifts, he shapes your character to carry them with humility, endurance, and power under control. That's where spiritual authority is born. Not in perfection but in purity. Not in charisma but in consistency. This is why it feels so hard. Because you're not just growing, you're being fortified. The foundation is being dug deeper so the calling can go higher. The delays aren't punishment, they're preparation. He's exposing faulty mindsets, healing emotional fractures, maturing your responses. You may have been the person who used to lash out, run away, or shrink back. But now, you're learning to stay, to trust, to discern, to walk by faith and not by sight. And here's the mystery, nobody claps for this kind of growth. There are no trophies for choosing forgiveness. No headlines for quietly walking away from what would have compromised your soul. But heaven sees it. God honors it. And when the time comes, what he births through you will carry weight, because it was formed in fire. Fire that burned away pride. Fire that purified your motives. Fire that forged a new version of you, one that's not just gifted but grounded. And maybe that's exactly what this season is about. Not quick wins or overnight success, but the deep, invisible formation of a vessel God can trust. Because the truth is, many want the promise but few endure the process. And even fewer allow the process to change them. But you're not just surviving this refining, you're being transformed by it. You're becoming unshakable, not because everything is easy, but because your roots are growing deep in the soil of surrender. And this surrender, this unseen battle for internal integrity, is preparing you for impact that lasts. Because what comes next won't require a version of you that's still bleeding, still bitter, still broken. It will require clarity, resilience, and a love that reflects the one who carried you through it all. So while the world may not notice what's happening within you right now, don't underestimate it. Because when God finishes what he started in you, the fruit will speak for itself. Number 5, your life awakens a deeper hunger for God in others. There's a kind of influence that doesn't come from a platform, a title, or a spotlight. It comes from authenticity. From someone who lives their faith quietly, consistently, and deeply. When people look at your life and start asking, what's different about them? That's not about personality, it's about presence. The presence of God that lingers in your words, your patience, your peace in chaos. You don't have to preach to stir something in others. Sometimes just how you carry your trials becomes a sermon. The way you endure without bitterness. The way you keep showing up even when nothing makes sense. That alone starts igniting a hunger in those around you, not just for answers but for God. And what's so powerful about this influence is that it's not forced. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're just living truthfully, and in doing so, you're awakening spiritual curiosity in places where there used to be only doubt, indifference, or numbness. This kind of impact can't be manufactured. It comes from time spent in the quiet places, when nobody was watching, when you were crying out for emotional healing, whispering Oration para Sanar Heridas, when you were surrendering your past to Dios Sanami Corazon, letting go of what broke you. That secret history with God is what others now sense, even if they can't explain it. They feel consuelo espiritual in your presence. They see how your peace holds steady when the world shakes. And slowly that invisible hunger starts rising in them too. I want what they have. Not your job. Not your appearance. Not even your knowledge. They want your peace. Your intimacy with God. The freedom you walk in. That's how God uses your journey to liber el alma of someone else. Because you didn't just heal, you kept walking in healing. You didn't just cry out once. You built a life of surrender. And now, that posture is starting to preach louder than any words ever could. And let's be honest, you never asked for this kind of influence. You were just trying to heal. You were just trying to survive your Noche de Sanidad. But that's what makes your story so powerful. It wasn't crafted to impress, it was lived to survive. It came through fe en medio del dolor, through sanar la tristeza, through trusting when nothing made sense. And now, without even noticing, you've become a living testimony that restoration is possible. That God still meets broken people. That he still whispers into the darkness and says, I'm here. Your scars now speak, not of shame but of survival. Your peace now preaches, not of perfection but of process. And what you've gained in the secret place is now unlocking hunger in people who thought they'd never believe again. This is how revival begins, not always in stadiums but in small rooms, through quiet lives, and in the heart of someone like you who simply refused to give up. Most people don't even realize what's stirring in them when they encounter someone whose life radiates surrender. They might say things like, there's something peaceful about you, or, I feel calm around you. But what they're actually sensing is the residue of God's presence you carry. Without quoting a single verse or preaching a single sermon, your life begins to speak to the deeper places inside them. It's not your perfection they're drawn to, it's your healing. Your peace isn't loud, but it's loud enough to disrupt chaos. You don't flaunt spiritual knowledge, you reflect emotional wholeness. And that, in itself, is what sparks hunger in others. It's your scars, not your strength, that often carry the strongest anointing. Because when you've walked through deep emotional healing with God, when you've prayed the prayers no one heard, cried the tears no one saw, your very presence becomes a quiet testimony. A living prayer for the wounded soul. And people begin to wonder, what did they do to find this kind of peace? Sometimes, without even realizing it, your transformation becomes a mirror for others. Not a mirror that shows them their failures, but one that reflects what they could be, whole, restored, emotionally free. For some, that reflection brings hope. For others, resistance. Not everyone is ready to face their internal wounds. Some would rather live with numbed pain than risk opening up old memories. But even then, your life has planted a seed. Maybe it's a friend who starts listening to worship at night. Maybe it's a coworker who quietly opens the Bible for the first time in years. Maybe it's someone from your past who sees a social media post you almost didn't share. Small things, subtle shifts, but in the spiritual realm? Earthquakes. Your journey becomes the signpost that says, healing is possible. You are not just carrying peace, you're distributing it simply by being obedient to your healing. Your quiet faith becomes louder than noise, and without trying to be the answer, your life points people to the one who is. This is what it means to awaken hunger for God in others. It's not about hype. It's not about emotional performances. It's about living authentically, even while still healing, and allowing the peace of God that surpasses understanding to speak for itself. You may never fully realize the number of lives touched because you didn't give up, because you surrendered, because you allowed God to restore your soul when it would have been easier to numb the pain. And now, others are starting to believe that deep emotional healing isn't just for the spiritual. For them too, because of what they see in you. Not just someone who made it through, but someone who was changed in the process. That is a testimony hell can't silence and heaven continues to use. There's something undeniably powerful about walking into a room and shifting the atmosphere without saying a word. That's what happens when your soul has been refined by fire but not consumed by it. You don't carry bitterness, you carry breakthrough. And the weight of your healing becomes a quiet gravity that pulls others closer to God, even if they can't explain it. Maybe you've noticed it, people begin opening up around you without knowing why. They share their fears, their pain, their questions. They see a safe place in you, not because you have all the answers, but because your spirit doesn't flinch when they share their brokenness. That's what makes your life magnetic. It's not charisma. It's the anointing that comes from surrender. You've allowed God to walk into the most painful corners of your life, the memories, the trauma, the regret, and instead of hiding them, you've turned them into altars. And people sense it. Deep calls to deep. Your healing activates a hunger in them they didn't know they had. In a world addicted to noise, your inner peace becomes its own kind of rebellion. You're not chasing validation anymore. You're not living to impress or prove. And that makes others question their own pace. Why am I striving so much? Why am I still holding on to this pain? How are they walking through storms with that kind of calm? These are the silent questions that start to surface when someone encounters a person who has truly healed emotionally with God. And that's when curiosity is born. Not the shallow kind, but the soul-level curiosity that leads people to search, to pray, to ask for more. They might not tell you. They might not even understand what's stirring in them. But what your life is doing is pulling them closer to divine restoration. You become the evidence that healing isn't a fantasy, it's a process worth choosing. That's the kind of legacy that doesn't need a platform. It just needs consistency. And maybe you've wondered if your journey has been worth it. Maybe you've walked through such deep valleys that you've asked God, was all of this pain necessary? But look around, even if they don't say it out loud, lives are being touched. Souls are being stirred. Not because you preached louder, but because you lived truer. Your life has become a prayer in motion. And every time you show up with grace instead of anger, every time you respond with wisdom instead of ego, every time you choose healing over hiding, you're testifying. You're proving that there is life after heartbreak, clarity after confusion, peace after storms. You're carrying a silent revival, one that doesn't need a mic to be heard. And the best part? God's not finished. There are more people your story will reach. More souls that will be awakened simply because you dared to heal with God. Deeply, emotionally, and completely. Number 6. You witness provision that goes beyond natural explanation. There comes a moment in the journey of faith where logic fails. Not because you've lost your mind, but because you've gained a new lens. And through that lens, you begin to witness a kind of provision that makes no earthly sense. Doors open that should have stayed locked. Bills get paid when the numbers don't add up. Peace shows up in the middle of storms that should have broken you. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's what happens when you walk in alignment with a God who doesn't play by human rules. He's not limited by market conditions, job titles, or earthly resources. When you're walking in His purpose, provision follows obedience, not predictability. And it's often when you have the least in your hands that you begin to see the most from His. Because provision in the kingdom is rarely about what you can see, it's about what you're willing to believe. Let's be honest, there have been seasons where everything looked empty. The account, dry. The job, unstable. The plan, non-existent. And yet, somehow there was always enough. Somehow meals kept coming. Peace kept showing up. Someone called at the exact right moment. A random opportunity appeared just when you were about to quit. That's not just God being nice, that's Him being intentional. His provision doesn't just fill needs, it builds trust. And more than just giving things to you, He teaches you through the process of dependence. Because what if the miracle wasn't just that you got through the valley, but that you learned how to walk without leaning on your own strength? That's divine provision, not just external supply but internal sustainability. You didn't lose your mind. You didn't fall apart. You're still here, and not because you were strong, but because God sustained you supernaturally, even when you didn't see it happening. And maybe that's the part we overlook, that some of the greatest provisions aren't material at all. They're not paychecks or promotions. They're moments of peace in chaos, clarity in confusion, courage in fear. They're divine delays that protected you from what you thought you wanted. They're rejections that made space for redirection. They're hidden hands of grace guiding your steps when you couldn't see 2 feet ahead. Provision isn't always about receiving. Sometimes it's about preserving. And when you realize that, you start walking differently. You stop panicking when things don't make sense because you've seen too much. You've seen manna fall in your wilderness. You've seen oil multiply when the jar should have been empty. And now, you trust. Not because you've figured it out, but because you've learned that faith feeds the future, and provision will follow wherever God leads, even if nothing about it makes sense on paper. One of the most humbling things about walking with God is realizing that He doesn't always provide what you want, but He always provides what you need. And often what you thought was a lack was actually divine protection. Maybe the job didn't come through, but your peace did. Maybe the relationship ended, but your identity was preserved. You didn't get the yes, but you got your sanity. That's the kind of provision you don't post about on social media, because it's not flashy, it's foundational. It's the kind of provision that reshapes your view of God, not just as a provider of things, but as a keeper of your soul. It's when you realize He didn't let it happen, not because He didn't hear your prayer, but because He loved you too much to give you what your ego wanted instead of what your spirit needed. And sometimes, what looks like a setback is actually sacred strategy, a hidden act of mercy in disguise. But let's talk about the moments when He actually does show up in ways that leave you speechless. The exact amount of money appears the day before a bill is due. A mentor walks into your life without you even asking. A random message shows up that confirms what you were just praying about. That's the kind of alignment that breaks the illusion of coincidence. It's like heaven tapping your shoulder, reminding you, I see you. I'm with you. Keep going. Because here's the truth, when you walk by faith, you start living in God's rhythm, and that rhythm includes supernatural timing. Not fast, not slow, perfect. And that perfection is not about comfort. It's about transformation. Because every time He provides for you, something inside of you shifts. You stop stressing so hard. You stop striving so much. You stop trying to control everything, and start trusting that what's meant for you won't miss you and what's not can't stay. Here's the crazy part. The more you witness these divine provisions, the less impressed you become with the world's version of success. You start craving presence over platform, peace over applause, purpose over popularity. And why? Because you've tasted something real, something eternal. You've seen that God doesn't need human permission to move in your life. You've seen Him bypass gatekeepers, rewrite outcomes, and restore what you thought was gone forever. That kind of provision marks you. It ruins superficial chasing. It ruins fake blessings. And it creates a new hunger, not for more stuff but for more of Him. You begin to wake up and say, God, surprise me again. Provide not just around me but within me. And He does, because He always has. Even when you doubted. Even when you questioned. He still showed up, not because you were perfect but because His love doesn't depend on performance. It's rooted in His nature. And His nature is provision. After witnessing divine provision repeatedly, something begins to shift in your vision, not just your situation. You stop looking at needs the same way. You stop panicking over deadlines and start praying with expectation. You stop begging for scraps and start walking like someone who knows their Father owns the table. Because now you've been trained to see lack differently. What once made you anxious now makes you attentive. You begin asking, what is God trying to teach me through this delay? What's He preparing me for in this quiet? And that shift in perspective is provision too, mental, emotional, spiritual. It's not just about paying bills or fixing a crisis. It's about God reshaping your mindset so that you live in faith instead of fear. That kind of shift? You can't buy it. You can't earn it. It only comes from experience. From walking through valleys and realizing, time and time again, that God was already in the valley before you got there. People who haven't seen this kind of provision often assume you're just lucky. But you know better. You've lived through nights where sleep was stolen by worry. You've faced doors slammed in your face, connections that broke, seasons that stripped you of everything, except your faith. And even when you had nothing left, you still had enough because God was with you. That's the lesson provision teaches. God is the source. Everything else is a resource. Jobs change. People leave. Circumstances shift. But the source remains. And once you know the source, you stop chasing the wrong things. You stop being desperate for people to choose you. You stop manipulating outcomes. You rest, knowing that what flows from heaven will never need to be forced by your hands. It'll arrive when it's supposed to, and it'll always bring more than you expected, not just materially but emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. So now you walk with a quiet confidence. Not arrogance but assurance. You're not worried when others rush ahead. You're not shaken when plans fall through. You've seen too much. You've tasted too much. You've lived through seasons where God provided not only miracles but maturity. And that's why you're calm in the storm. That's why your voice carries peace when others panic. Because you've walked through fire and came out with evidence, not just that God saves but that He sustains. So when someone asks, how do you stay so grounded? You don't point to a formula. You point to your history. You say, because I've seen God do what no one else could. I've seen Him show up in ways that made no sense on paper but changed everything in my spirit. That's the kind of provision that marks your life. And once you've lived like this, you're no longer moved by fear. You're led by faith in a provider who never misses. Number 7. You find it impossible to turn back, because this calling has fully claimed you. There comes a moment on every spiritual journey where returning to your old life no longer feels like an option. Not because you couldn't go back, but because going back would mean betraying who you've become. That's what it means to be fully claimed by your calling. You begin to realize that what God placed inside you has rewired your vision, your values, and your voice. The places that once brought you comfort now feel foreign. The people you once blended in with now look at you like a stranger. Not because you changed for the worse, but because your convictions have outgrown the conversation. You see too much, feel too much, discern too much. Not in an arrogant way, in a spiritual way. You're not who you were before the fire, and that's not something you can undo. This calling has taken root, not as a job, not as a label, but as a part of your identity. And it's not that the journey has been easy. In fact, that's what makes the calling even more undeniable. You've battled doubts. You've questioned everything. You've had moments where you begged God to choose someone else, anyone else, because you felt unqualified, unseen, unworthy. But no matter how far you tried to run, the fire kept finding you. That still, quiet pull kept waking you up in the night. That ache in your spirit reminded you, you were born for this. And no matter how broken you felt, something deeper whispered, keep going. You're almost there. That's how you know it's a real calling. Not because it flatters your ego, but because it crushes it and builds something stronger in its place. Obedience, surrender, strength that doesn't shout but endures. You start to realize that your calling isn't just about what you're called to do, it's about who you're called to become. And becoming takes time. It costs comfort. It requires pruning, pressing, and often seasons of isolation. But in all of it, you grow more anchored. You stop needing applause to validate your direction. You stop comparing your pace with others. Because now you're not just chasing purpose, you're carrying it. It wakes you up. It keeps you going. And even on your worst days, it reminds you, this isn't about you, it's about what God is doing through you. That's why you can't turn back. That's why going silent isn't an option. Because this isn't ambition, it's assignment. And once you've tasted that kind of clarity, everything else just feels like noise. There's something sacred about the point of no return. That place where you realize your life has been permanently altered by divine purpose. It's not always loud. In fact, it's often quiet. It happens in the stillness, in moments when no one is watching, when you could take the easy way out but something inside of you won't let you. That something is the calling. It doesn't beg for attention, but it refuses to be ignored. It whispers when the world is shouting. It convicts you when compromise looks tempting. And more than anything, it holds you accountable, not to performance but to transformation. You no longer crave what once entertained you. You no longer admire what once defined success. You've tasted something eternal, and now everything temporary feels empty. Because when God marks your life, nothing else satisfies. This is where the fire of your assignment becomes a furnace of refinement. You're not just working for God, you're walking with Him. And in that walk, He stripped away every illusion you thought you needed. The approval of others, the false sense of control, the timelines you thought were sacred. He's replaced them with something better, clarity of purpose. You start to see that rejection was protection. That delay was development. That the silence was sacred space for shaping your soul. And now, even when you don't have all the answers, you know one thing for sure: you can't go back. You've outgrown your old fears. You've graduated from people-pleasing. You're no longer obsessed with being understood, because the Spirit of God has given you peace that surpasses understanding. And here's what's even more powerful: your presence now carries weight. Not because you're perfect, but because you're anchored. You walk into rooms and the atmosphere shifts. You speak and people feel something break open in their own lives. Not because of volume or charisma, but because of the oil. Because this calling has been crushed out of you, through seasons that no one else saw. And though it cost you comfort, it produced credibility. The kind that can't be bought or taught, only endured. That's why there's no turning back. Not because you're too far gone, but because you're finally home. The calling is not a destination, it's your design. And now that it's awakened, the only way forward is deeper. The deeper you go into your calling, the more you realize it's not something you do, it's who you are now. The shift is internal first. You start walking differently. Not with pride, but with purpose. Your conversations change. Your desires evolve. You become increasingly sensitive to what used to go unnoticed. Moments of disobedience, misalignments in relationships, distractions that drain your focus. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because the weight of your calling won't allow you to live casually anymore. You can't unsee what God has shown you. You can't unfeel what He stirred in your spirit during those quiet nights when you wept alone. You can't deny that something sacred was birthed in your lowest place. And no matter how tempting it is to revert to what's easy, you know deep down there is no peace in retreating. Only delay. Only regret. Because once you've walked with God in the fire, shallow waters will never satisfy again. This is what it looks like when you're fully claimed by your assignment. You no longer see obedience as sacrifice. You see it as alignment. You stop begging for doors that God didn't build. You stop explaining your process to people who were never called to understand it. And most importantly, you stop asking for permission to be who God already confirmed you are. The fear of man breaks. The need to be liked fades. And in its place grows a holy boldness, a quiet confidence that says, I may not have it all figured out, but I'm moving forward. You begin to realize that faith isn't about being fearless. It's about being faithful in the presence of fear. And that's what this calling demands. Not perfection, but consistency. Not hype, but holiness. A willingness to keep walking even when the road disappears beneath your feet. Because the one who called you walks with you. And now you've arrived at the edge of something new. Not the end, but the threshold. A spiritual place where God begins to unfold what He's been preparing all along. This isn't the moment to shrink. This is the moment to stretch. To trust that everything you've endured wasn't wasted. That the warfare had a purpose. That the silence was sacred. That the pruning was proof. Because what's next isn't just about you, it's about what God will do through you. And to walk into that, you must settle this in your spirit. There is no turning back. The comfort of the past cannot compare to the clarity of your calling. And as much as the journey ahead may intimidate you, the greater danger is settling for a life that no longer fits the mantle you now carry. If this message stirred something inside you, it wasn't random. There are moments when a word enters not just your ears, but your spirit. Because sometimes all it takes is one reminder to wake up the version of you that's been buried under doubt, fear, or fatigue. So here it is. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. God hasn't forgotten you. He's refining you. And maybe this was the confirmation your soul needed, to keep going, to stop apologizing for your fire, and to finally walk in the calling that's been pulling at your spirit for so long. So if this spoke to you, let it speak to someone else too. Click that like button, not just for the algorithm, but to mark this moment as a shift in your journey. Subscribe if you know you're being prepared for more, and you don't want to miss the next word meant for your season. And in the comments, tell me, what part of this message hit you the deepest? Because your testimony could be the encouragement someone else is praying for. This isn't the end. This is just the awakening.